We're going to talk about learning disabilities and the timeline and history of them. So learning disability is a term that is currently used to describe a group of neurological conditions that interfere with a person's learning. Under the LD umbrella, there are numerous disorders relating to listening, speaking, reading, reasoning, and mathematical calculation. Sometimes this can be referred to as the hidden handicap because when someone has a physical disability, you can generally see it. When someone has a learning disability, it's a little bit harder to tell. And because of this, if a teacher doesn't know a student has a learning disability, the student just may appear lazy and unwilling to do the work and just seem like they don't care. When in reality, the student is trying to work as hard as they can. They have to work harder to succeed, and they may feel feelings of frustration, anger, depression, anxiety, and worthlessness. They may have a low self-esteem because they are feeling they are dumb because they do not understand this as well as their peers do. This is a brief timeline of the history of learning disabilities. We will go on more in depth with it a little later on. In the beginning of learning disability history, learning disabilities is a genuinely newer concept where students who were labeled as learning disabled were just put in a classroom for the educatively retarded. They were just being thrown into special ed settings when it wasn't necessarily what this child needed. There were 5 leaders going back through the timeline. There were 5 people that really started learning disabilities. In 1937, a neuropathologist named Samuel Orton used the term struccosymbolalia to describe a problem that he observed in children with learning disabilities. Between all these children, he saw a lot of reversal in symbols, letters, and words, such as B and D, just mixing them up, or confusing the words was and saw. And among all the students that he saw with this reading disability, he noted that there seemed to be a continuum that ranged from mild to severe, and a lot of cases were not actually the same as each other. And the Orton Dyslexia Society was named for him, and he had discovered dyslexia. Samuel Kirk is another important person. In 1963, he was a part of a group of parents who met to discuss the needs of their children who had difficulty reading. At the time, children with disabilities were being referred to as minimally brain damaged, which is not what they are. And the parents just wanted to get the best education for their children. They want their children to have the best education, and Kirk suggested the term learning disabled, which was adopted and established into the current organization, and minimally brain damaged was no longer used. These 3 people, Elena Boulder, Byron Rook, and Linda Siegel, began attempts to classify learning disabilities in LD subtypes since the 1970s, and this is still going on. They initiated the passage of Public Law 94-142, which is now known as the IDEA, which guaranteed that handicapped students in ages 3 to 21 would receive a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. And as Section 504, we're going to talk about a little bit later, but this is a lifelong thing. It is not an IEP, it's not in place of an IEP, but we will talk about this more later. There are some casual factors of learning disabilities. There could be a strong familial factor, so there could be strong family genetics that had learning disabilities and just being passed down to the offspring. There could be an incidence increase where there was a difficulty, pregnancy, delivery, or prematurity. There are certain prenatal conditions that can harm the fetus, including a condition that interferes with the fetus receiving adequate oxygen, nutrition, and maternal use of cigarettes, drugs, or alcohol during pregnancy. There could have been a postnatal or birth trauma, early childhood exposure to lead, aluminum, arsenic, mercury, and other neurotoxins. There could have been incidence factors of learning disabilities. An estimate of people, roughly 5 to 30% of people have a learning disability. In the United States, about 3 to 8% of children have ADHD. Approximately 1 in 150 children have autism, and 1 in 94 boys are diagnosed with autism. Currently, there are more boys that are identified as being learning disabled than girls, and the ratio is about a 3 to 1. Primary characteristics of learning disabilities can include perceptual deficit. This occurs because the brain misinterprets sensory information. 80% of students that identify as being learning disabled have problems in the area of reading. Deficits in phonological processing, and this relates to a difficulty in learning how to read. Phonological processing skills include the awareness and ability to sound out sounds, which is known as phoneme discrimination within words. The ability to learn these symbols of the language and recall their sounds quickly, and the ability to generalize this information to a variety of oral, written, and reading tasks. Co-occurring additions. There are 3 prevalent conditions, and they are attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, conduct disorder, CD, and Tourette syndrome, TS. ADHD generally concurs with an LD in approximately 1 out of 3 individuals who are identified for special education services. Some symptoms of ADHD include impulsivity, distractibility, and inability to stay still, sitting or standing, blurting out, or overreaction to stimuli. A conduct disorder is sometimes co-occurring with ADHD. In addition to the primary symptoms of inattention and impulsivity from the ADHD, those with CD may exhibit a lack of respect for the right of others. They may be cruel to other people or animals. They could be lying, setting fires, intentionally breaking rules. People with conduct disorder may have been abused or neglected, or possibly both. They may not have received the logical or reasonable consequences for improper actions, and may have been raised in an environment where it was okay to be cruel to other people. It was okay to lie. It was okay to set fires, and they were not perceived as unusual, and in some cases they were encouraged. Tourette syndrome is an inherited neurological disorder. This is characterized by involuntary motor tics or vocal tics, and sometimes both. Symptoms begin in childhood, increase in adolescence, and genuinely improve in adulthood. Condition occurs in about 1 out of 1,000 children, and more often in boys. Tics may vary from a mild to severe and may include excessive eye rolling or blinking, twitches, finger tapping, snipping, and throat clearing. In more serious tics, there could be squealing, barking, echolalia, which is the repeating of words, not knowing what you're repeating, not knowing them, bursts of profanity, racial slurs, and sexually inappropriate words or actions. There are some programs and settings for learning disabled. In children who are younger, they can be referred to intervention services and specialists through their family doctors, or parents may request that the local early intervention team evaluate their child in their home or at a controlled location. In LD children between the ages of 3 and 5, again, there are programs available to the state's local early intervention team. When a child enters elementary school, there are a variety of settings for obtaining service. The child will be in the least restricted environment. Special education services include special education personnel could come to the room and just assist the child. Special educators could meet with the regular teachers in a collaborative or consultative mode to plan the child's program. The child could go to a resource room, or the child could be placed in an LD special day class for all or part of the day, depending on the child's needs. Now we're going to talk about the anatomy and the function of the brain. The central nervous system, or the CNS, is responsible for learning. Nerves all over the body pick up sensory stimuli and send messages via the spinal cord and the brain. The brain interprets what has been seen, heard, felt, smelled, and tasted. It integrates new sensory knowledge with previously stored information and decides what to do with the new information. The smallest unit of the CNS is a single cell called a neuron. When this sensory information is received by a neuron, we say the neuron fires. CNS produces chemicals that either sends the message along its way or inhibits the passage. Chemicals keep the message flowing, and we call those neurotransmitters, and chemicals that interfere with the message flowing are called neuroinhibitors. As a person experiences more exposures to a specific stimuli, the branches of the neurons begin to grow towards the next neuron and eventually closes the synaptic gap. This creates a learning connection, which allows a faster response time the next time the stimulus is received. The brainstem is in charge of automatic functions such as breathing, heart rate, and digestion. The cerebellum controls bodily movements, including posture and balance. The cerebral cortex controls all conscious activities. The cerebral cortex is divided into two hemispheres. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, and vice versa, the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. There are 4 brain regions. There is the frontal lobe, there is the parietal, there is the occipital, and the temporal lobe, and they all have their own job, but they do not work alone. They work together to complete even the most basic tasks, such as making a decision. There could be some implications of brain injury on learning. Some learning disabled students have brain injuries, which can affect learning and behavior. Brain injuries, including concussions, may be caused by car accidents, falls, and sports accidents. The impact from the ball hitting the skull jars the brain and can cause injury. Brains can be injured from the initial impact that causes the brain to strike the skull, but can also be injured by the impact when the force of the first impact causes the brain to move and hit another part of the skull. In one study, there was showed that girls tend to get more serious concussions than boys from an impact-related injury due to their smaller body frame size. It is important to have children evaluated immediately after any type of blow to the head. In cases of multiple concussions, learning and memory attention may be permanently affected. Sometimes the brain simply cannot handle any more traumas without severely impacting learning, even when students are playing that of the grade school or high school of sports. A particular injury will affect a given child depending on several factors: the location and extent of the injury, the individual's neurological maturity at the time of the injury, and the nature and extent of efforts to retrain the brain. When a brain injury occurs or part of the brain is surgically removed, remaining areas will try to compensate for lost functions known as plasticity, and this tends to decline with age. Traumatic brain injury has been associated with higher rates of depression and can cause sleep problems. This can cause some psychiatric conditions, including generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, in addition to primary symptom of depression.